What's going on, everybody? It's 2 Commas, Year of the Wager. Thanks for tuning into the channel. Today we're going to be playing some 8-16 mix, and I think you're going to enjoy this episode. We've got a lot of different types of games we're playing, and not too disappointed in the result. So enjoy, and I'll see you on the other side. Remember, like, subscribe. All right. So I got off to one of the very fastest starts I've ever gotten off to in a game of 8-16 mix. And that's fine by me because that's what you want to have happen when you're playing poker. We're going to start this session with a game of pineapple stud high-low regular. It means there's no 8 qualifier, and it also means it's harder to scoop the pot because anyone can qualify with any low hand. It doesn't have to be lower than an 8. And when you're playing pineapple stud, that means you're dealt 3 cards down and you have to pitch 1 instead of super stud where you're dealt 4 cards down and you have to pitch 2. I decided to pitch the ace of hearts, which is unusual, but when you have 6, 7, 8 and you're going for a straight, that's just what you're going to have to do. The dealer wastes no time in pairing my 7 on 4th Street, and then on 5th Street she gives me another 7 for a set of 7s, and then on 6th Street she gives me a 9 to make me open-ended, and then on 7th Street down and dirty she goes ahead and fills me up with 7 full of 8s. Only problem is I'm playing heads up and my opponent is gonna automatically win the low side of the pot because there's no qualifier, which is exactly why I don't think this game makes any sense. The next hand we are going to play is good old-fashioned Drawmaha. I start off with 4 to the flush in my hand, which is good enough to enter the pot. When the flop comes out, I don't see anything too great, so I check and then call the $8. And then on my draw, I end up hitting that 4 of spades, which gives me the ace high flush. And just like Hannibal on the A team, I love it when a plan comes together. I go out and bet $16 to make sure I build this pot. Not sure if I'm going to be able to make anything happen with the board. It does not look that promising, but a flush in my hand is good for half the pot, and I want to keep a 3rd player in calling bets, which he is very happy to oblige. And on the river, I go ahead and fire another 16 into the pot. I get 2 callers, and we end up chopping the pot with my flush in my hand, and both other players made full houses on the board. In the next hand of note, we're going to be playing Archie, and I start off with the Jack 10 254. So that means on the button, I'm going to be getting into action going for a straight or a low. And I toss 2 cards and pull in a queen and another 5. That's not going to cut it, but it is worth sticking around. So I call the $8 and draw another 2, tossing my queen and my 5. On this draw, I get a little bit better because I do pull in a 6, but that does mean that I'm going to need to toss one of the extra 2s and pull that miracle 3 if I want the straight for both the high and the low, or an ace to just make the low. But we have high hopes when we toss that card away, and when you know it, we actually pull in the gut shot. We've got a straight to the 6, which means we're going to be getting both the high and the low in this pot. Isn't it a beautiful thing? We're going to stick with Archie for the next hand since it worked out so well on the hand before, and I'm starting off with 4 to a high straight, which I think is good enough to 3-bet. All I need is an ace for Broadway and a 9 for another high straight. You know, I want to keep some callers in this pot. I toss the deuce, and you gotta love it when the poker gods bless you on the very first draw. You don't have to wait not 1 iota to make your hand, and that's exactly what happens because I pull in the ace, which means I have Broadway. On Broadway. That also means I'm gonna be calling $8 on the first draw. Now you might be saying 2 commas, why not raise? Well, it's because I didn't want to scare my opponents off. I wanted to keep them into the big bet streets, where I was gonna raise on the big bet streets, which is exactly what I did, getting the two opponents to stick with me. And I'm pat, obviously, and I'm gonna be pat all the way to the end. Now, a high straight is not gonna necessarily win all the time, but I'm hoping it holds up here, and it does hold up. I end up chopping the pot with the low hand and splitting the third player's money. Can't be mad at that result in Archie. The next hand we're going to be playing Badugi high-low, and with a starting hand like the one I've got, I'm going to be honest, I hope that we were actually playing just Badugi low, but that's why I decided to toss the 6 instead of the 7, because you want to have a little bit more of the cards towards the middle when you're going for a scooper and Badugi high-low. I pull in a 4 of hearts, which doesn't actually get me there, so I decide to actually toss the 7 on this opportunity and pull in a 7 of diamonds, which means I have an extremely good low Badugi. I don't know if it's going to be enough to scoop the pot. If someone else ends up making a Badugi, it won't be enough, but I'm going to keep firing anyway, as I know I have a Badugi right now and likely to win the low side of the pot. And when I get my final bet in on the third draw, that's exactly what ends up happening. I end up chopping the pot with someone who ends up making a high Badugi. We're playing Badugi high-low one more time on the next hand. And again, I'm starting off with a hand that is beautiful for just the low side of the pot. And I wish we were playing straight up Badugi. All in all, I tend to like non-split pot mixed games because it's a little bit more of a blood sport and you're able to win a lot more money instead of wasting a lot of action putting chips in the middle that are just going to come right back to you in a split pot. That's okay though. Again, you got to play the games that are in the mix and do your best to scoop when you can. I end up keeping my 7-4 deuce and tossing the 10. The 5 of clubs doesn't help me that much, but we've got one more draw, and that's what poker is all about. It's about second and third chances to make your hand. I tossed the 5 of clubs. We need a good one in order to pull this pot in, and that ace of hearts pretty much guarantees that my 7 high Badugi is going to at least take down the low side of the pot. Let's see how it shapes up in this action when I raise it and end up chopping the pot. In the next hand, we're going to switch the action up a little bit and get into Badeucey. That means you're going to be splitting the pot between the best Badugi hand and the best deuce to 7 hand. I start off with a monster 4 to the wheel with 3 different suits in my hand, which means I do have a chance to take home both the Badugi and the deuce to 7 hand. I end up making on my second draw the wheel. That's right, baby, the wheel, which means the nuts, which means I'm going to be taking home at least half this pot, but it was not the right suit in order to guarantee the Badugi side of the hand. I do have a good 3 card, but the good 3 card isn't going to hold up. We end up chopping this pot between the best Badugi and the wheel. In the next hand, we're going to be back to playing Pineapple Stud, but this time we do have a qualifier on board with the 8, which means we either need to make a hand that is lower than 8 high, or we need to be taking home the high side of the pot. I don't waste any time getting off to aces up with another pair of jacks in my hand. 6th Street doesn't improve me that much, and 7th Street does me no favors to deliver a full house, but turns out I don't need a full house to take down this pot because my opponent did not make a low hand and my aces up were good enough to scoop the entire pot, which is the only way you should be playing poker, scooping like you're playing at Baskin Robbins. In the next hand, we're going to be playing some good old-fashioned blood sport Badugi. That means we've got a single winner and we just need 4 different suits in order to take it down. We start off with ace 2-3, which is what I like to call good enough for a raise. We're firing in the pot, but we find out that our opponent actually has a Badugi already made when she 3 bets it and then I 4 bet it and she stays pat. That's not good, but we do have the best 3-card low starting hand you can have, and hopefully I can get lucky to make the 4th suit that I need. I stay in the pot all the way to the river, calling bets and multiple bets, just to find out that the poker gods don't actually like it when you start off with 3 beautiful cards like an ace 2-3, and I was not blessed on the river with the card that I needed, and I end up having to muck. That's okay though, because on the very next hand, I'm actually dealt a 9 high Pat Badugi. That means I'm going to be firing into this pot all the way, especially when I'm on the button. Let's see if that 9 can hold up through 3 draws. If someone makes a Badugi, will I be brave enough to break my 9? We'll just have to see. But as we continue with the draws, it turns out that my opponents don't look like they're going to make a Badugi, although I'm firing the entire way. So on the last draw, my opponent checks to me, and I decide to play it safe and just check it back, turning over my 9 high, which means I'm good enough to bring in all the chips in the middle. On the last hand of the session, I'm playing 5-card Omaha 8 or better. I've got a suited ace, a pair of 3s, and ace king, so we're gonna see what we can make happen. And what ends up happening is the flop gives us some hope and some potential, because there is a flush draw out there, so I'm keeping it going. The turn does not necessarily bring it home for us, but I still feel relatively decent about my hand. And on the river, I'm able to actually make the nut flush, so we're obviously gonna keep firing it in there. I don't know if we're gonna have a good enough hand to bring down the low side of the pot, but my 7-3 actually does hold up, and I end up scooping this pot, which is a pleasant surprise. All in all, this is one of the fastest starts I've gotten off to in an 8-16 mixed game. We were winning hand after hand. If it wasn't for chop pots, I'd probably be up even more. But that's okay. When you buy in for $400, you can't hope for that much. But almost doubling your money in just a couple hours isn't bad at all. And that's the way I like to play poker, winning money.
So not too bad, right? Got a little money off the table, which is hard to do in 8-16. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next episode. Remember to like and subscribe. Tell all your friends. Let me know if you want to have a meetup game. All right.